My name is Michael Coleman. I'm from the Soundworks Collection, and it's such a pleasure to be with you tonight, just to celebrate not only the work of this episode, but of the show in general. Let's go ahead and bring down our guest. I see Robbie Stambler, our supervising sound editor. Welcome, Robbie. And we have Lindsey, Alvarez, and Beau Borders, re-recording mixers. This episode is, when I asked them which episode do you want to, show, which one do you want to pick, they said, well, this one has a little bit of everything. And I think it truly does. It has orcs and battles and crazy environments and beautiful music from the composer Bear McCreary. But just to roll back a little bit, I remember I was talking with Robbie when he first told me he was going to be working on this project. Why don't you set the time and place? How did this project come about? What did they tell you about this series at the time?
So I first heard of it in 2019, towards the end of 2019, and I went and I met with Jake Rice, who was the post-production supervisor and one of the associate producers on the show. And he kind of told me, so, we're going to do this thing. We're going to do it a little unconventionally. We think we want to do it in New Zealand. Are you interested? And I was like, absolutely. I mean, what a dream franchise to play in. And yeah, I think that's around the time we were at another event at SCAD, and yeah, I'll let you know what I was doing.
I think if you look at the density of the storytelling, the environments, how much material the audience is being shown, it's pretty remarkable. We have 8 episodes, probably close to 8.5 hours. Is that right? Maybe, guys? You lived it. You guys worked through it. So I feel like, just the task of that much material and like I say, how dense in a very thoughtful, tasteful way. There's moments of silence. There's high tension. There's bombastic score and everything we want from a Lord of the Rings story. So maybe for Lindsey or Beau, can you talk about just taking on such a large task of this, I don't want to say a world building, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew we had some pretty big shoes to fill with, other movies called Lord of the Rings. But yeah, this was just a monster undertaking, and you're right, we did kind of pick this episode because it had a little bit of everything as far as that epic feel and a real quiet, intimate feel, and big long moments where sound effects really take over, and then big long moments where we really switch the gears and go right to music. So we just kind of thought that this would represent a little bit of everything for you guys. And you guys get to see it on the biggest screen anybody's gotten a seat on. We didn't even mix on a screen this big. I mean, we do movies in this room, so to play an episodic TV show in here, this was a thrill for us too.
Yeah, it's something about the show. There's no holding back. What they're presenting here is on par with any great epic, movie making, storytelling, just trajectory. There's no holding back. Lindsey, what can you say just about the position you're put in, of knowing the amount of material that Robbie and the production is going to be sending you guys? How do you quantify, and especially also with Bear McCreary's tracks?
Well, it's fun. I mean, so Steffing, our dialogue AD, our supervisor, provided a lot of the tracks that were cleaned up by, a great team of dialogue editors. So it was really just, making sure everything was clear. I mean, they're shooting on location everywhere, so there is a lot of cleanup and excellent cleanup done by the team, and great recording that was captured. But she puts it in a funny way. With the dialogue, it's all story, no glory. So, but you make sure that it comes through, and balancing that with the amazing sound effects, and then with the huge score that Bear composed was not. It wasn't a crazy task. I enjoyed it. It's a pleasure, and especially working with these guys. But yeah, it was fun.
And just to hop on that the dialogue conversation, this episode, it was the most challenging by far in regards to the dialogue, because one thing about all the orcs in the show, they're all prosthetic up, and so all the production dialogue for them was kind of behind rubber and didn't quite work. So we made a choice early on that we were going to revoice and ADR them, So, that's one thing when there's maybe a handful of them, but now you have a whole army that's completely revoiced, ADR'd. And so, yeah, there are single voice actors who played the specific orcs, and then we had orc group actors come in. And of course, they have to exist right alongside armies of humans. And, they're all humans, really. So kind of putting a nuance and a pitch and an effect to kind of deepen the orc army so that they can sit right next to the human army but feel different. Yep. Another fun thing that Andrew Moore, who was our first assistant sound editor, who's just a genius, I can't sing his praises enough, because really, the only way you get through this amount of material is by having the best, most well-oiled machine at your fingertips. And then even above that, having producers and showrunners that really enable you and give you all the resources, right? But the thing about Andrew was all that armor in the show, it's all rubber. And it all like kind of has like this squeakiness to it. And Andrew was able to code some software, because he's a software developer, to remove the rubber armor sounds from all the production, which was just an insane task. And then, of course, Foley came in and recorded all this amazing detail for the armor, and then we put that on top, and then it completes the picture.
There's a moment that I really love, which is this moment when the Nampot, is that right? Nampot, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
This death chant, this choir, when it's like, I think the first time the orcs were vocalizing this kind of like all in unison. Tell like the backstory of that, and it's really interesting because it's a blend of what Bear is doing, and how did that come about? How did you guys evolve that sequence?
Oh man, I mean, it was a lot of fun, and there's actually a hint of it in the episode prior to this one, and so we sort of like figured out what we were gonna do for this one and that one, but it was basically like a bunch of group orc people, saying Nampot and chanting, and it's all, processed as well. But then we're blending that with Bear's score, and he had given us like tens, maybe hundreds, it wasn't hundreds, but so many tracks of recordings of, male vocals singing this chant that's in the music. And it was, it was a task to like blend, our group orcs with the singing orcs, because we were like, all right, they need to still be scary, but the singers, they sound so beautiful, and we're like, well, we have to feature them too, so we need to figure out a way to like, make them both live in this world. So yeah, I think so it starts with the gritty like nah, nah, Nampot chant of the group orcs, and then blends into this beautiful but still dark, chant from Bear's singers.
To counter that, there's the moment at nighttime when we're waiting for the orc army to arrive, and it's quiet, and the tension is just like palpable. Can you guys talk about the quiet moments in this? How you guys are crafting that?
Those are sometimes our favorite moments and kind of the hardest moments to put together, because when we, like Robbie kind of said, we're three people that represent a giant army of sound people, and until we start mixing, it's all about building and adding sounds and coming up with all the right sounds. And that moment was kind of invented on the mix stage. I mean, we had plenty of music. We had plenty of distant chanting orcs. We had Nampots coming from over the mountains. And the more we started taking away and the more settled we got, the more we liked it, and the more it got creepy and it got scary, and we weren't really sure what you were going to hear first. And then we just start with Bear's little music, these little pings that come over the hill, and it makes the bigger moments feel more earned when you do that. And that was a thanks for pointing that one out, because that was a struggle.
There's a few of them in this episode where it gets quiet, and a lot of times there's beautiful moments of montage, like when the army is arriving to the village and it's slow, and the galloping of the horses. Can you talk about creating some of those montage moments that is very articulate and very specific?
Yeah, well, we show up on the day, with it fully realized, and we haven't added that sort of slow motion sheen to it. That's something that we develop in the mix. That's such a triumphant moment. I love that moment. The music, Bear brought it so hard. And really digging into the sort of low-end, rumbly, surreal vibe, and then snapping out of that into, real frame rate, you're in it. It was just such a great moment, and that started with the cinematography, and then we picked up on that. But those are the types of things that Beau and Lindsey can identify super quickly, and we attack it.
I also want to talk about just crafting and the attack scenes. It's very easy just to go full bore and just go loud, but like there's very specific gore that as an audience member you're like, cool, like this is a lot. And it keeps building, and it does it in a way that I think is true to Lord of the Rings. It's just very gritty, very dark, and there's always that sense of like, how the heck are they going to survive and get out of this at every turn? So can you talk about, especially with this episode, with the big attack sequence, especially with the second wave after you realize things are going south?
Yeah, those are, it's about as dense as it gets. And, like any good meal, if you just put every ingredient in the pot, it's just going to taste like mud. So, it was really just about, we really had to hyper-focus and almost like, how like on your phone, if you touch a certain part on the camera, it'll focus on that little area. Well, we kind of have to do that with scenes like that. We have to just go, I really just want to hear this spear, and I really want to focus on that horse, and then I really want to feel the black blood coming out of the orc, and now I don't want to hear any of that. And like in the middle of the battle, right when we encounter this like 8-foot tall orc that now we have to have a fight with him, there's a little moment where you just hear background swords and clangs and bangs and things. You only hear it for about a second. We have that sound the whole time, but we've removed it everywhere because a lot of mixing is the process of what not to hear. And so that way we can focus on those things, because otherwise it would just be a wall of noise, and your brain would shut down. You don't want to hear that for an hour.
And to tack onto that, we really tried to give a lot of character to the action. The production design in the show is so rich. Like the sound really needed to match it, and we had a discussion early on with the showrunners about the elf swords should sound a certain way, and the orc stuff should sound more rusty and nasty and not. And so we took all of these cues visually and really worked them into the sound design. And another thing, Chris and Jimmy, two tremendous sound editors who helped out on this episode, they did this thing that I just love where they're playing the sound of the weapon as a sharp metallic thing that leads up to the hit. And we create a little pocket, and it's all those sort of really focused moments that then Beau can highlight in the mix that create continuity, and you can still follow the action, even if you're not watching, you can follow what's happening.
Just to follow up on that too, because these scenes are like, it's a big puzzle that you're just trying to fit each and everything, but really, it's really nice that you guys get to hear it in this space with this setup, because it's like it's not just on the screen where you're hearing things, but you're hearing it like behind you and the music up here and wherever. So I feel like that's also part of the puzzle, that we're not trying to like play everything all at once, but it's like highlighting those things and then featuring this thing back there, So it's a lot of fun to get into, and you're just like, whoa, when you first play it, and we're all faders up. It's like, whoa, hang on. But it's fun to just like be like, all right, what do we want to see here? So, yeah.
And you guys highlighted, I think, 3 clips or 3 different kind of moments. Do you guys want to, Beau, do you want to drive over here, or Robbie?
I don't know how that thing works.
There's a computer over here. Someone's going to hit space bar.
Yeah, so I'll just play through some stems. I think I'll just kind of live play through.
This is like the Robbie director's narrative. This is his dream. It's my dream.
I've never heard it from up here before.
I know we're going to get blasted.
So there's this little moment here in the front. I'm just going to solo it when it comes up. Turning off the music here. So that right there was just a little bit of foreshadowing, the volcano and what's going to happen. So you're actually hearing the rumble of Mount Doom erupting there in the beginning, which I thought was fun. And then I'll play forward, and you guys can hear all of the orc presence. You know, a big part of making them menacing was just hearing them breathing and feeling their presence. So I'm just going to solo the group stem. So, you know, running with this idea that, you know, the orcs, these are primitive orcs, they're not in their homeland, they're kind of a fish out of water. And we really ran with this idea of making them feel sickly and uncomfortable. And I think you can hear it in the breathing and the presence. I'll turn the dialogue on too.
From Erid Vitrin to the Ethel Arnen, we have endured. Yet tonight, one more trial awaits us. Our enemy may be weak, their numbers meager. Yet before this night is through, some of us will fall. For the first time, we do so, not as unnamed slaves in faraway lands.
And I'll just play through to the non-pod chat so you can hear all that.
And sisters, in our home! No but.
So this is with no music.
This is the night. We reach out the iron hand of the Uruk and close our fist around these lands.
I'll flip the music on now.
We're just gonna DJ it the whole night for you guys.
So you can
The Robbie remix.
The
I
Robbie,
think the
you say
subwoofer's
that?
right behind me.
Yeah, right. I think it's a great example of just showing how when everything comes together, like the impact and the emotion that music carries and effects, and like the nuance in just the vocals alone. There's so much storytelling, just the characteristic, the performance of the orcs. So I think that's a great example. One of the other ones that we can maybe jump to is, do you want to show the army or the battle, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. I'll play through some of the battle stuff, maybe no music, and so you can hear some of the all the weapon stuff we were talking about.
And one thing to note about all this stuff is this gives you an idea of just how dense and giant and crazy it is. And like I said before, you know, you're getting to hear it in this really cool theater. But we had to keep in mind that this is a television show, and in this day and age, people do watch this on their phones and on their tablets. So this all had to be scalable down to something that you're not just going to listen to on your phone, but you might listen to on your phone on the little speaker turned down because the baby's sleeping. And you know, we really wanted to take great care into the fact that that's just how people watch things these days. So, you know, every time we would get through scenes, we would be putting on different kind of headphones. We'd watch on sound bars, on TVs, and everything.
iPads.
iPad, you know, everything, and you know, we just wanted to make sure that it kind of worked in every little format, and we always kind of thought about it in terms of scaling downward, because we mixed in Atmos, but in home theater Atmos, and this actually was the first time we hadn't even really considered scaling it upwards, which is kind of what we did tonight to play it here.
But I think the translation is evident that no matter which direction you go, I don't think it's like this pros and cons to any of it, because the fact of the matter, I told Robbie, I watched episode 4 or 5 when I was flying back from LA with like noise canceling headphones. I'm like, it sounded great, and it did. And in fact, it's because of that down. I think maybe let's play this clip, but you could talk about your headphone mix of how you QC'd it.
Sure. So this is just going to be effects, Foley, and BGs.
Excellent mixing.
That was amazing.
So the end of that was kind of a good example of where you really focus on just hearing the specific things that you need to hear, because there is a giant music score playing and we want to hear every note of that as well. So, you can't really play the exact reality of what's happening, but there you go.
I mean, like, if probably on the day of production, it did not sound like, that's the funniest thing. Oh, is that how it sounded on the day of set? Like, just put a microphone up, we're good, right?
No, almost every sword that you see that makes contact the ends of them are CG.
Oh yeah,
So-
that was a funny moment. So you want to be prepared, and the visual effects shots aren't always ready when you're ready to work, and you kind of have to anticipate that they're coming. But yeah, I remember Chris and Jimmy, who were cutting all the sword stabs, were like, "So these are going to be extended, right? Is that going to change the timing?" I'm like, "Oh, there's only a few sword stabs, so it's okay. We'll just knock them into sync during the final mix."
Poor guys had to resync every single sword hit in this because everyone was either a little early or a little late.
Yeah, a lot of detail work.
So going back to in terms of mixing and thinking about the end goal of deliverables, when it's on a streaming format, to me, I feel like people will say, "Oh, there's some sacrifice that has to be made," and that's not the case at all. In terms of when you're thinking of your stereo mix, which is, I experienced it in stereo, it's phenomenal. How did you think about that in terms of downriver, how you want to say it, downriver, that's good, in terms of QC in a stereo mix?
Well, there was a big philosophical sort of challenge for myself. In the film space, we're so lucky to have, a big room that we can pump full of air. We got big subwoofers. It's a controlled environment. And all of that stuff goes out the window when you're making something to be, experienced in real life. So it was really just kind of coming to terms with that, and then, figuring out ways to combat that. So, I mean, in technical terms, not relying on the super low frequencies, trying to create more harmonics, slightly higher range. Also, just being realistic about dynamic range and trying to rein it in a bit. So it's not quite as dynamic as you might want in a cinema, something that could exist in real life. And then, like Beau and Lindsey said, we just listened to this thing on everything. I mean, television speakers, iPhones, iPads. And I would do a final QC in a pair of Sennheiser hi-fi headphones, so I could hear every pin drop. But a lot of love was put into the stereo mix. I mean, Beau, can you talk about that?
Yeah, on a lot of movies, we know you're going to go to a movie theater, so you're at least going to hear it in 5.1. Hopefully, you're going to hear it in Atmos. And the stereo mix has kind of become just a necessary deliverable that just kind of gets put on a hard drive and sent away somewhere. But on this, we realized, that's kind of our hero mix. What are we going to do? And we looked into there's all kinds of different little plugins and pieces of gear you can buy that stereoize your mix and give you 3D spatial blah 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 blah. And at the end of the day, we talked to some of our mentors, and the consensus was that just mix it. And so we did. And a lot of the way we did it is we just turned it down and decided what went away there, what are we not hearing, and then turn that stuff up. And then, but you also we also don't want to punish the people that have a really good home theater setup. I mean, plenty of us, myself included, spent some time and money on some gear that my girlfriend hates that's in the living room. But when we crank it, it sounds right. It sounds like the mix that we did. So we don't want to punish those people that really put time and care into hearing it dynamically. So we had to find this middle ground, it was just from doing it over and over and over and over again until we found that happy medium. So this is where we landed.
I mean, it's still super impactful and just a vicious track, to put it so kindly. Lindsey, talk about music. There is a lot of music in the whole series, and it's necessary because it carries emotion, it carries tension. How can you describe the sheer amount of material, and what is it like in terms of finding dynamics and opportunities to feature and also have it lay back?
Well, yeah, Bear created such a masterpiece with this, with a series. So, each storyline and each character, they have themes. And so you kind of pick them up as you're watching. But, I would say, music is pretty much the last thing that we put into the mix. I pre-dub the dialogue, Beau's pre-dubbing sound effects, and so we come together with the music, and it's, you just listen to it and you kind of do what the music tells you to do, and you're like, oh, hang on, there's dialogue here, and so you're kind of like watching it as a viewer and reacting to it. And that's what I do, and he packs them probably like 20 stems wide, which is great because it gives us flexibility to make adjustments in the mix, with strings or piano, probably have to come down for dialogue or some other thing. And so we are trying to like take advantage of all the spectral frequency space, but also make it, enjoyable. And yeah, that's what I would say.
And when it comes to the effects with the music too, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with Beau on a handful of projects, and we have a really great rapport. We will always be communicative about, in this scene, I'm going to be doing stuff in the lows, so maybe you should not do something in the lows, or vice versa. And then, on the day, it all shows up, and we do have to figure it out. And it's about being flexible, and when there's big sound design and big music that's all supposed to play together, having a few routes, kind of ways you can get in. So on the day, I'd look at Beau and be like, hey, all that low stuff that I did, yeah, get rid of it, because it's totally muddying up the cool thing that Beau did. And then, I'll put something on top, or vice versa. And, Beau and I would always call each other at a moment notice if we needed each other's help. It was really fun.
But that being said, with this, I think the next clip of the dam opening, the lava bombs, like there's plenty of it feels more physical as an audience member. You feel it, you see it and you hear it, but you feel it because you guys are putting so much emphasis on the dynamics. Can you talk about just crafting this moment? Because to me, it's like everything is coming up to this point, and from here on, everything has changed, at least from a story point.
Yeah, I mean, it's that sequence was really, really challenging, and the way our way through it. And really, our way through this entire show, it all started with discussion with the showrunners about, this show is going to have fantastical, crazy stuff that happens. But we really want to ground all of that action in something that's believable and reality. And that sequence, it's so worldized. You're hearing these things happen on a massive scale. And then you're seeing them from different perspectives, sometimes extremely wide, miles wide, and sometimes close up. And I think the way we got around that was trying to worldize it all. So if it's really far away, you're not hearing details. You're hearing air displacement and energy and air ripping. And we would always look for what is the real version of this. It might not always be the most cinematic, and we could always blend that cinematic thing back in, but trying to ground each thing in something that was real. And so, yeah, I mean, when the lava bombs are going off and things are flying through the air, you're hearing, jet recordings that, have real rippy air displacement, recordings from rocket launches, anything that had a tremendous amount of power. And, I did a lot of research. There's crazy videos on YouTube of natural disasters happening, of avalanches, and you can look and see that stuff. And it always sounds, it sounds different than you think it would. So I would always try to lean it to that place. But there are some fantastical elements in there. So when the lava bombs are flying in, those are lion roars that have been processed. And, the sound of the lava bombs hitting and sort of liquefying, I had made these sounds where I took explosive sounds and frying, sizzling sounds, and sort of did this transformizer sort of effect. And to
I think you're making up words.
Yeah.
We know what you mean, actually.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense, right? To create that sort of liquid frying thing. So, despite, trying to make it feel real. There's some very unreal things in there. Also, tracking the ones that are closer to you instead of the ones that are further away, like that was a thing, and keying into that sort of high-pitched whistle, like something's coming right at you and it's going to land on your head. All of those things helped.
You can see how excited he gets when he talks about this. I mean, it's just infectious. I think it showed, you know, the thing too, that's the first time that I felt that the whole room opened up in the mix. Is that the case of really like emphasizing the surrounds? Because at that moment, I heard it tonight at least, when we hear the explode, or the first presence, you hear it before you see it. I felt like you guys, did you lean into that more? Or?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you often just follow what the picture's kind of telling you to do, and certainly, yeah, we want to let you know that this isn't even just happening in this one little area. This is happening all around the mountain. So, yeah, we were able to definitely use the space that way.
I think with that sequence too, the fun part or the experiment that we did was Bear had scored that whole, like with the water flowing. It had a choir, or the chorus going throughout the whole thing, and even when before the eruption, and we were just feeling that, all right, we feel like with all this choir and then the explosion, it's not as impactful, and so we're like, all right, well, let's see what happens if we get rid of all the choir and the voices and wait for the actual eruption, and it's just like, whoa, it like gives you chills when those singers are just like singing at you, so. It was a fun experiment, and we got Bear's blessing to do that, but yeah.
Do you want to set some of these tracks up?
Sure. So I'll just play some of this scene, and I'll just flip through the stems while we're doing it. I'll start with music muted.
I mean, it's really incredible. Just when you think like, if there was no score and we just played that, it's still scary, it's still impactful, it still works in a way. It feels so much more real. It feels like this is like the worst case scenario. And I think the music obviously heightens it, makes it more cinematic. But it's really interesting. I mean, you hear it, you feel it, especially spatially. I mean, I think you definitely hear it in that case. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I don't ever want to sit this close to the speakers ever again. This was a mistake.
one of the coolest elements in that scene, I think, is the group. You know, the sound of the villagers like freaking out. Like that's the emotional through line. Often with these big sequences, it's not about the big explosion, but it's about the reaction and the emotion of it.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? I just want to open it up at the very end here. Yeah.
That scene where the build, like I guess it's in the beginning where the tower falls, and we feel it. It's like the loudest part of the movie. How did you do that?
Yeah, that was, there are certain sounds that lend themselves to like perceived loudness. So actually, it's probably not the loudest thing, but because it's all like rock based and these big solid things, and we're able, we have moments where a rock slams and falls on somebody, we're able to kind of peel everything out right before that happens and do real punctuated things. So if you took like a sound meter and judged how loud that is, there's probably louder things, but that was just such a pointed moment. So yeah it would.
That's the thing, is like you feel the physicality of the visual plus the sound to get, like, the brain just kind of takes over, right? Like it's just like that's intense. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is simple. How many tracks are there in this right now? It's incredible.
Oh boy. So what you're hearing are, we call them stems. So we've created like the music stem. You're hearing it in 5.1. So it's just 5 channels, and then the 0.1 is your subwoofer. But I mean, just the music alone would have started as hundreds of tracks, and probably thousands of tracks that were actually boiled down to hundreds that were handed to us. Sound effects are the same way. I mean, if you really added it up, it could be over 10,000, but then it by the time you're done boiling it all down and making those decisions and removing things and honing it in, I mean, you end up, stereo is 2 tracks. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, in the back.
That scene in the woods where they're sitting on the bench, it's quiet, and you hear the water. Was that on location?
So that's a great question. Our producer, visual effects producer, Ron Ames, I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. There's so many scenes where he's like, more water, more wind, more birds, more this, more that. What I didn't realize is he's so sensitive to knowing that they shot it all on a set, on a green screen. There's no water, there's no birds, there's no woods. When Isildur and Galadriel are talking on the boat, they're not on a boat, they're in a room. And you can, if Lindsey didn't mix the dialogue properly, you could actually hear them. You could hear the fact that they're in a room. There's no water. There's no other boats. We're faking it all. And the guy kept pushing me all the time. And I realized that he sees the green screen. Like, he's looking for those mistakes. So, yeah, that was
That
what we
scene
made up.
that scene was with water, though.
Oh, was it?
There was a little bit.
I retract my entire statement.
But there were other ones that didn't.
No,
But that one was because I remember.
we were
it was
always
terrible.
trying to extend the world and the stuff that you're not seeing on camera. And so any opportunity, whether it was a wind, foliage, birds, water, you're dealing with a world with no noise pollution. It's like an ancient world. So leaning into those natural elements whenever possible to expand the frame, that was our prerogative.
It was also helpful because I would be like, oh God, I have water all through the tracks here. I need help with the consistency.
In the location sound?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, these are not quiet sets. You can imagine just to show the physicality of the actors, the performances, they need to kind of be at a certain intensity, right? So that's where
Cicadas too in New Zealand are pretty epic.
Oh my gosh.
Luckily, we found in my sound library, I found cicadas that matched exactly, so we could bring Phil to it.
You could be driving on the freeway, windows up, and you're like, "What is that sound?" And it's the cicadas. Like, honestly, they're so loud.
yeah.
What was the role of the director, Charlotte Brandstrom, in post-production or in the sound mix? Was she there, or did she just let you guys do what you needed?
I mean, that's a great question. I'll just say really quickly, is a big difference between a feature film and TV in terms of the role of the director and the showrunners at that. So, I mean, because I asked Robbie the same question about that too.
Yeah, so I was on the show day one when they started shooting, and so I had the luxury of working with the picture editors and the directors during their director's cut when they were in the cutting room. And very often they would complete a scene that they were very happy with. They'd turn it over to me, and I'd do a first pass on it. And I would always make a point to really dig in with the directors and the filmmakers of each specific episode and learn what they liked. You know, I always ask people that I work with, like, what's your favorite sounding movie? And Charlotte told me, oh, The Hurt Locker. I'm like, oh, okay, we can get along here. This is awesome. So I kind of understood what her aesthetic was. And I actually, the scene at the opening of the episode at the tower, I did that first. And there was a moment right before he opens the door where it gets very quiet, and then the door opens and it's huge. And I remember when I gave it to Charlotte, she just like loved the door. Like she loved that moment. We got along great. So outside of that, the directors were not around during the final mix, but I always tried to make a connection early on to impart their will.
Question. Any other questions? Yeah.
How long does it take to complete each episode?
How long does it take to complete each? I gotta say that out loud because I asked the same question. You guys were on this. Okay, let's give context. You were on this show for how long?
Well, just the mixing portion was in total, I guess it would be 7 months, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we were 6
Yeah,
months in
7
New
months.
Zealand, and then we started it actually here at Sony for a couple weeks, and then we finished it here as well. But you know, that's longer than you would typically get for a television show. Being so far from home in New Zealand was part of that, and we're just really happy that Amazon and Jake Rice and our producers were able to allot the amount of time, because we wouldn't be able to do this on a normal television schedule.
Yeah, and to speak of the schedule, we kind of just, when you're doing something this large and it's this complicated, you can't really plan more than like a week or two in advance. It's kind of just fruitless. So we would just kind of just show up and mix, and it's like, we know we got to do something. So being flexible and you know, being able to hop onto one episode, some visual effects are done in this other one. Let's put that one back up and work on that. And then, all right, put that one back on the shelf. Let's work on the next. So it's kind of hard to, you know, quantify one specific episode.
But something you did say, you did a linear way in terms of mixing from episode 1 through 8. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And that, you know, that was driven by the music schedule, scoring, recording, and all that. Yeah, we had to go in order. And it was great because then we learned what the show was along the way. So like I remember, you know, Beau, you were like, I think episode 8, you're like, we finally know how to mix the show.
That's why it took so long.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit of you guys being on location as opposed to just being handed all the cuts after they've already been shot? How does that change the way you approach?
What's the question?
He was asking what was the benefit of us being on location, meaning in New Zealand, and actually that was just a plan that was put forth before any of us were ever really on it. You know, you can get great tax benefits if you package your shooting and your post and everything like that. So that was just kind of you know, when we all got hired, we were just informed it's happening in New Zealand, and we're not going to say no to that because New Zealand's great.
I mean, well, one huge benefit is being able to walk the sets, because when day one of shooting, I was there, and I'd go to the location and I'd walk through the prop department and be able to look at things I might not necessarily even see on camera in the show, but they really help inform you of the world. I mean, any time a post-sound person gets the opportunity to peek into the production, it is just so valuable, and you can learn so much.
I would love to keep talking about this show because there's so much to talk about, but thank you, Robbie, Beau, Lindsey. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight.